Well, Packers training camp is so close, you can almost taste it. The veterans report tomorrow. Heck, I report tomorrow. Me and Big B will be there for this first week of training camp, and I am so incredibly excited to get the season kicked off. And with training camp comes one of my favorite discussions to have every year, and that is these individual position battles that we follow every single day on Twitter, seeing who's having a good practice, who's having a not so good practice, who's performing well in the preseason, who is Matt LaFleur and all of the other coaches, who are they talking highly about, so that we can make our best predictions for the 53-man roster that the Packers get down to after that final preseason game. So today I'm going to talk about 5 position groups that I'm going to have my eye on in this training camp session. There's pretty much competition at every position this training camp. But these are the 5 main ones I'm looking at. I'm not going to bore you talking about the backup quarterback position. And we did talk about some of these position battles in the episode we did with Cassidy Hill this past week. So if you didn't watch that, I recommend you go ahead and watch that as well to get you fully ready for training camp. So let's get started with the first position here, and that is running back number 3. And I know this can easily be, dismissed as a not important position. Heck, the Packers pretty much just rolled with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon all of last season. But there is going to be a primary backup here, and it's an interesting group to look at. You have Patrick Taylor, who has been on the roster for a few years now. The Packers have kept him along on the practice squad. And then you also have an undrafted free agent from last year out of Iowa, Tyler Goodson, who is just a really shifty guy. And then finally, the 7th-round draft pick from this year out of Central Michigan, and Lou Nicholson, who is pretty much built like Eddie Lacy, but also has some speed to him, kind of like Eddie Lacy, at least when he was in his younger years of playing. So, all 3 of these guys have a unique skill set. And I think it will really come down to, one who is the best in pass protection, and then also special teams value and or receiving ability. Marrying the pass and the run game together is something that Matt LaFleur always talks about. So if you have a running back that can protect your quarterback on passing plays, that's going to be a big bonus for you. So, that pass protection is going to be something I'm looking at in training camp and in the preseason. And I'm sure the coaching staff will as well. My pick to win this is going to be Patrick Taylor, just because they've kept him around for so long. He obviously knows the system the best. But I would consider this a make or break year for Patrick Taylor, at least as much as you can get for a third string running back on this team. Um, like I said, he's been on the practice squad for quite a few years now. If he doesn't have a year where he can be a reliable backup, I see them probably moving on from him after this year. Keeping things on the offensive side of the ball, let's move on to the wide receiver position. And this is one of those positions that, like I said, we talked to Cassidy about at length in our episode with her. But it is really an interesting, somewhat concerning room. I really like all the players that are in this group, but there is no um backbone, I guess you could say, to this wide receiver group, because all of your leaders are year 1 or year 2 players. Christian Watson is obviously leading that room, and hopefully we see his last half of last season carry on to this year, and he's able to keep on progressing and developing the way it looked like he did near the end of last year. But then outside of Watson, you have Romeo Doubs, who seems to be consistent, had a really good training camp last year, and hopefully he gets more opportunities on the field in this upcoming year. And then Samari Torrey, the 7th-round draft pick from 2022, who the Packers really seem to like as well. And then you have the 2 draft picks from this year, Jaden Reed out of Michigan State in the 2nd round, Dontavian Wicks out of Virginia in the 4th. And then, I consider those 5 guys to be the locks. And then you have Grant DuBose, the 7th-round draft pick, piled in with a host of other guys competing for a 6th spot, maybe 7 they keep. But Grant Bose, Malik Heath, Jeff Cotton, and Bo Melton. Bo Melton, a speedy guy who we know can contribute on special teams. Jeff Cotton, the veteran in this room at 26 years old. Malik Heath, the undrafted free agent out of Ole Miss, who seems to really have, the tools to succeed at this level. So all 4 of those guys, it's going to be a week by week thing. I think for who has the best practice day in and day out, who is making the most big plays in the preseason as well to earn that 6th spot on this team. Maybe after the 53-man roster cutdowns, some team releases a veteran wide receiver that the Packers want to add to the roster because, those 5 guys, like I said, while they might be great, they're not really adding a lot of veteran experience to the room. And then for position group number 3, I'm going to say the right side of the offensive line because the Packers can just do so many stuff here with how many versatile pieces they have. And I think specifically Zach Tom and Josh Nijman, where they end up on this offensive line rotation is going to be really interesting to find out. And this, this really isn't a camp battle. Both of these guys are pretty much locks to make the 53-man roster. But definitely something to watch how the Packers are lining up in practice and in preseason as well. I think your ideal starting offensive line, the 3 guys on the left side, and then including your center in that David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, and Josh Myers going from left to right. I think that's a pretty solid group there. Josh Myers might, I think he still has his center spot pretty secured at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's, having some bad play during the season if they look to move Zach Tom over to center, just because he can play it. And then after that, John Runyon, I think, is pretty solid at right guard. But the right tackle position, like I said, between Zach Tom and Josh Nijman, it's pretty much a toss-up, I would say. Either way, though, you have to feel good that you have 6 solid starters. Outside of that, there isn't much depth. But you have 6 guys that you can rely on. And obviously, injuries will happen. But, you have a solid group. The depth of the offensive line is something I talked more about in our episode with Cassidy again. You have Caleb Jones, the ginormous undrafted free agent out of Indiana from last year. Rasheed Walker, the 7th round draft pick out of Penn State. It seemed like a steal at the time, and we'll see if he's able to take a year 2 jump, show more on the field. And then Jake Hansen, 6th round pick out of Oregon, mainly a center. We haven't seen much from him, hasn't seen the field too much. He started early on last year, and it was not too great. And that's the same case with Royce Newman, 4th round draft pick out of Ole Miss. And then Sean Ryan is kind of in the same boat as Jake Hansen, except he's a 2nd round draft pick and really has not shown much. The word on the street from last year's training camp is that he did not look ready anywhere, mainly a right tackle, but just did not look comfortable at any spot on the offensive line. So the depth on the offensive line and then also how they line up specifically at right guard and right tackle will be an interesting point to watch here. All right, switching things over to the defensive side of the ball, the cornerback position. Okay, you have 3 guys that are healthy that I really like. Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas, and Keyshawn Nixon, all 3 solid starters. And then after that, you have Eric Stokes, who has a leg injury, and we're kind of in the dark about that right now, as we always seem to be with Packers injuries during the offseason. I believe it's an ankle injury that he suffered in Detroit last year and still recovering from that. So hopefully by the end of the training camp, he's ready to go. And I don't know if he's instantly inserted into the lineup. We'll have to see. But I'm not sure exactly who is the 4th or 5th cornerback at this point. You have Shamar Jean-Charles, Corey Ballantyne, a draft pick from this year, Carrington Valentine out of Kentucky. And then Keandre Thomas is a name to watch for sure. Not on many people's radars, but he did have a really solid training camp last season, as well as a preseason as well. So a guy that's been in the system for 2 years now. I could very easily see him sneaking on to this 53-man roster. So, both the health of Eric Stokes and then also that fourth or fifth cornerback is what I'm looking at. Okay, and finally, the all-important safety position. Okay. Oh boy. Safety. I'm a little bit worried. I'm a little bit worried. I'm kind of glad that the TV broadcast you can't see the safety play and all that's going on there. You have Darnell Savage, and then you have like 5 other guys who will see what they add to this team. I think, Darnell is pretty solid there. And then, Jonathan Owens coming over from the Texans, led safeties and tackles last year. See what he adds. Tarvarius Moore, kind of a special teamer from San Fran, but he also started at safety a few times for them. He seems to be a solid veteran. And then you have the draft pick out of Iowa State, Anthony Johnson Jr. Excited to see what he adds. Could be a day one starter. Not so sure about that, though. I definitely think he'll be a starter sooner rather than later, though. And then finally, Ennis Gaines and Rudy Ford, 2 undrafted free agents that the Packers have had in their system for a few years now. And I'll be interested to see. I think they're really, for the preseason, all 6 of these guys, there's nobody that you're really protecting from injury in the preseason. So I think they're really, through all 12 quarters that they have in the preseason and the joint practices, are going to be rolling all sorts of combos out there, especially at the safety position. I would think you'd want chemistry between the 2 guys you have starting out there, as far as, passing off reads to each other, passing off assignments to each other. So really interested to see the Packers, throw things at the wall and see what sticks at the safety position. It's concerning right now, but, I would not be surprised if 1 or 2 of these guys just show out and have an impressive training camp and make all of us feel a little bit more comfortable at that safety position. With that being said, I think that's all of the camp battles that I have to go over today. Let us know your thoughts on these position battles, who you think's going to win in the comments down below, and then follow Underage Packers on all the social medias. With that being said, talk to you later. As always, go Pack Go.